Hello and welcome to another gameplay glimpse here on youtube.com/PSNStores or PSNStores.com, wherever you're watching this. Here checking out Dear Esther Landmark Edition. So I believe this came out last year, but just now getting around to playing it. This is a game by the Chinese Room, which you may know from Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, which is also on PS4. And they also did a game a game called Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, which is not to be confused with Amnesia: The Dark Descent, kind of a different game. But Dear Esther is the Chinese Room's first game, and it's on PS4. Curve Digital brought it over. It was originally a PC game. I want to say maybe like 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago it originally came out on PC. But just gonna go... gonna hit start. Here's the 4 little areas. There's a director's commentary. Just gonna start with the lighthouse, and we're gonna see this. Start it off.
Dear Esther, I have lost track of how long I have been here, and how many visits I have made overall. Certainly the landmarks are now so familiar to me that I have to remind myself to actually see the forms and shapes in front of me. I could stumble blind across these rocks, the edges of these precipices, without fear of missing my step and plummeting down to sea. Besides, I have always considered that if one is to fall, it is critical to keep one's eyes firmly open.
So this is Dear Esther. It takes place on an island, and kind of your goal is right up there. It's a beacon. That's kind of where you end the game. Spoilers. That's kind of clearly shown. But it's kind of the original game in its genre, let's say. If we want to put it bluntly, yes, it is one of those walking simulator type games. But I do not think that is a derogatory term. I actually really enjoy these type of games. But Dear Esther is kind of an interesting one. Dear Esther is an interesting one in the fact that being like the first one, it's very linear. There is kind of a lot of mystery to it. Maybe takes like even a couple playthroughs to even get. So it has a little bit of replayability. The point of the game, again, is to kind of just take in the story. We kind of got a little goose or what, a duck, whatever that was. The point of the game is literally just to kind of do what I'm doing right now. Walk around, take in the story, take in the visuals, and just kind of see where the story takes you. The one... kind of issue I have with the game, which I think other games in its genre, we'll call them first-person adventures, has progressed, is that games like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture isn't all that linear. Like, there's different areas to the game, but there's not necessarily like you're on a straight path from point A to point B, which Dear Esther has. So in that kind of case, it does really kind of feel like a game that the developers of Everybody's Gone to the Rapture made before.
Donnelly reported the legend of the hermit, a holy man who sought solitude in its most pure form. Allegedly, he rode here from the mainland in a boat without a bottom, so all the creatures of the sea could rise at night to converse with him. How disappointed he must have been with their chatter. Perhaps now, when all that haunts the ocean is the rubbish dumped from the tankers, he'd find more peace. They say he threw his arms wide in a valley on the south side, and the cliff opened up to provide him shelter. They say he died of fever 116 years later. The shepherds left gifts for him at the mouth of the cave, but Donnelly records they never claimed to have seen him. I have visited the cave and I have left my gifts, but like them, I appear to be an unworthy subject of his solitude.
So you basically walk around to specific points, kind of like you do in Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. How, like, hey, you walk over here, find a point of interest, and the narrator starts talking about different stories of different people who have been here on the island before. I think the narrator does a good job. There's not really any other characters per se in the game. Just the kind of ones he describes. Just the narrator talking is the main part of the experience. But the island is also a character itself, which is very interesting. And for a game that is, let's say 6-7 years old and is now on console, it looks pretty good, I would say. There are definitely some moments later in the game that are very visually appealing, that made me want to take a couple screenshots here and there. New in this game, I think the Landmark Edition specifically, is a director's commentary, which I would say is probably one of the more, let's say, engaging director's commentaries. They go into kind of how this, with the couple of the lead writers, I believe, or designer, and the composer for the game, I'll talk about just kind of how this game started off as a Half-Life 2 mod, how it just kind of has evolved over the years, and just they talk about a little bit on how their games have evolved. So this is take place kind of after everybody's gone to the Rapture.
Those islands in the distance, I am sure, are nothing more than relics of another time, sleeping giants, somnambulist gods laid down for a final dreaming. I wash the sand from my lips and grip my wrist ever more tightly. My shaking arms will not support my fading diaries.
So what I mean by it takes place after everybody's gone to the Rapture, there's no story comparison. I just mean that the director's commentary is recorded after even their latest game, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. So they don't mention that game specifically, but they do also mention games like Gone Home and Firewatch. And Firewatch, of course, just came out in 2016. So it's a fairly up-to-date director's commentary. They also talk about other games like Dead Space 2, System Shock, just how other games inspired it. Again, I think probably some of the coolest part of the director's commentary is how they tackle being the first in the genre of kind of they even quote it as themselves as a walking simulator, and just kind of how that genre has changed over the years, and kind of how it kind of is a bad term to some people.
Reading Donnelly by the weak afternoon sunlight, he landed on the south side of the island, followed the path to the bay and climbed the mount. He did not find the caves, and he did not chart the north side. I think this is why his understanding of the island is flawed, incomplete. He stood on the mount and only wondered momentarily how to descend, but then he didn't have my reasons.
Again, very kind of cryptic messages you're not really going to understand until you're later in the game, or even play through the game completely again. So I might take you to the end of the first area. Again, the game's not overly long.
When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this: to keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh.
So it took me about an hour and a half, maybe just a little bit over, maybe not an hour and 45 minutes to complete. I didn't feel like I was rushing. I felt like I was going to trying to find the little secret hidden extra dialogue paths, which, again, there's not much, way to go off the beaten path. It's very straightforward.
I quote directly: a motley lot with little to recommend them. I have now spent 3 days in their company. That is, I fear, enough for any man not born amongst them. Despite their tedious inclination to quote scripture, they seem to me the most godforsaken of all the inhabitants of the Outer Isles. Indeed, in this case, the very gravity of that term, forsaken by God, seems to find its very apex. It appears to me that Donnelly, too, found those who wander this shoreline to be adrift from any chance of redemption. Did he include himself in that, I wonder?
So right now this game is $10 on the PlayStation Store. I believe it did have a sale just recently for $4.99. But I guess that doesn't matter now since that sale is probably
Dear
over.
Esther, I met Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life.
So we're just going to go in this cave, see what's up in the cave, and we'll call it quits after this. It's not really a deep cave. But just kind of show you some of the visuals.
I find myself increasingly unable to find that point where the hermit ends and Paul and I begin. We are woven into a sodden blanket, stuffed into the bottom of a boat to stop the leak and hold back the ocean. My neck aches from staring up at the aerial. It mirrors the dull throb in my gut where I am sure I've begun to form another stone. In my dreams, it forms into a perfect representation of Lot's wife, head over her shoulder, staring along the motorway at the approaching traffic in a vacuum of fatalistic calm.
So this is just kind of the first main area, but here's a little glimpse of what's maybe to come, just kind of with symbols. There's definitely, again, later in the game, some pretty good visuals for a game that came out a while ago. That's basically all you can get to see in this cave. Just a little walk around. There is a zoom in. I'm using the right trigger, but I think you can use right trigger, left trigger, L1, R1, square, triangle, circle, X. Basically any button you can imagine. There's a zoom in. And that's basically all you have. You can't pick up any items. You basically just walk around, zoom in, and that's about it. One thing I should mention, that's a great cue. The music is very good. I don't know if it's as great as something like Rapture. Everybody's gone to the Rapture, but it's a soundtrack that fits well with this type of game, and is kind of a great, just kind of a mood piece, I guess I would say. Something nice just to kind of put on in the background if you're doing homework or picking up the house, doing laundry, something like that. And that's where we started, that lighthouse. But again, just the main game like this, and then the director's commentary. There are some extra trophies. There are like one set of collectibles that there's only 4, one for each area of the game. There's 4 areas. Shouldn't be too hard. There is no platinum trophy, so if you're looking for a platinum trophy, there is none. But yeah, that's going to be our look at Dear Esther Landmark Edition. It's on PlayStation 4 right now for $9.99. Just want to say thank you for watching. Check us out, other videos at PSNStores.com or YouTube.com/PSNStores. And also, if you'd like to support us on Patreon, you can. Patreon.com/PSNStores. And with that, we'll talk to you sometime in the future. Take care.